The first time they called us savage, we laughed. The second time we argued. The third time we stopped talking altogether. Kepler Station, Outer Rim, 2387C. Colonel Porter Reaper Eden stood before the reinforced viewport of Command Deck 7, watching the funeral pyres burn in the void. 17 ships, 342 souls. All because the Hegemony Council decided humanity needed another lesson in civility. Behind him, the tactical display painted the massacre in cold, clinical detail. The merchant convoy Serenity's Dream had been hauling medical supplies to the Proxima colonies when the Zephyrian enforcement fleet intercepted them. No warning, no demand for surrender, just particle beams and the screams of dying children over the comm channels. "Sir," Lieutenant Commander Eden Rose's voice cut through his thoughts. "The Council transmission is coming through." Eden didn't turn. His reflection in the armored glass showed a man carved from granite and fury. Graying temples, a scar that split his left eyebrow, and eyes that had seen too much of the galaxy's casual cruelty. "Put it through." The holographic display shimmered to life, revealing the familiar sight of the Hegemony Council chamber. 7 alien species, each representing billions of lives, each convinced of their own moral superiority. At the center, High Arbiter Zelnara's crystalline form refracted the chamber's light into dancing rainbows. Beautiful, if you could forget the blood on her hands. "Colonel Eden," her voice harmonized like wind chimes in a gentle breeze, "we trust you understand the necessity of today's action. The merchant vessel was carrying contraband weapon components. Medical nanoassemblers," Eden said quietly, "to treat the plague your people's mining operations unleashed on Proxima B. Dual-use technology," interjected Councillor Thex, his insectoid mandibles clicking with satisfaction. "As we have repeatedly explained, humanity's savage nature makes such technology inherently dangerous in your hands." Savage. There was that word again. "The loss of life is regrettable," continued High Arbiter Zelnara, "but the safety of civilized space must take precedence. We trust you will communicate this to your government with appropriate gravity." The transmission ended. The hologram died. Silence filled the command deck like a held breath. Eden turned to face his crew. 23 officers and enlisted personnel, the best the Terran Defense Force had to offer. They'd served together for 8 years, through the Centauri campaign, the Vegan blockade, the endless series of police actions that kept humanity penned in their little corner of the galaxy. "Rose," he said softly, "open a channel to Fleet Command. Priority black." "Sir, that's—" "Do it." Rose's fingers danced across her console. "Channel open, sir. Encryption at maximum." "This is Reaper Actual to Olympus Command. Authentication code Tango 77 Alpha." Eden paused, feeling the weight of what came next. "Request immediate activation of Protocol Fenrir. Repeat, Protocol Fenrir is authorized." The silence that followed seemed to stretch across light years. When Admiral Catherine Santos finally responded, her voice carried the weight of inevitability. "Confirmed, Reaper. Protocol Fenrir is authorized. God help us all." Deep space, Sol System, classified location. The Nemesis hung in the void like a predator waiting to strike. At first glance, it appeared to be nothing more than a large asteroid, one of thousands that drifted through the outer solar system. But beneath the carefully crafted rock and ice facade lay humanity's greatest secret, and perhaps its last hope. Admiral Santos floated in the zero-gravity command center, surrounded by holographic displays that showed the ship's true nature. 8 kilometers of pure, concentrated lethality. The fusion drive that could accelerate it to 20% light speed. The quantum tunneling torpedoes that could phase through enemy shields. The singularity cannon that could crack a planet's crust. "Status report, Commander Park," she said to the Korean-American officer manning the tactical station. "All systems green, Admiral. Crew complement at full strength. 2,000 of our best. Weapon systems showing optimal readiness. The hegemony's long-range sensors still read us as dead rock." Santos nodded grimly. Project Nemesis had been in development for 30 years, ever since the first diplomatic incident with the hegemony. Officially, it didn't exist. Unofficially, it represented everything the aliens feared about humanity. Our capacity for violence, our refusal to accept defeat, our willingness to drag our enemies into hell with us. "Ma'am," called out Lieutenant Torres from the communications station. "We're receiving Colonel Eden's after-action report on the Serenity's Dream incident. On screen." Eden's scarred face appeared in the hologram, his voice steady despite the rage burning in his eyes. 342 dead, including 67 children. Medical supplies destroyed. The Zephyrians claim the convoy was carrying weapons. As usual, they're lying. Santos felt something cold settle in her stomach. "Your recommendation, Colonel?" "They want to see savages, Admiral. I say we show them what savages really look like." The transmission ended. Santos stared at the empty hologram for a long moment, then turned to her crew. "All hands, this is Admiral Santos. As of this moment, we are at war. Not the polite, civilized war the hegemony prefers. The kind where they slaughter our civilians and we file diplomatic protests. Real war. The kind our species has perfected over millennia of practice." She paused, letting the words sink in. "The hegemony calls us savage because we're willing to fight for our survival. They call us primitive because we haven't forgotten that sometimes violence is the only language the universe understands. They call us dangerous because they're afraid of what we might become if we stop playing by their rules." The crew watched her in silence, faces grim with understanding. "Today, we prove them right." Hegemony Council Station. Harmony. Vega System. High Arbiter. Selenara's crystalline form pulsed with satisfaction as she reviewed the latest reports from the frontier sectors. The human colony ships had been turning back from their expansion routes. Their merchant fleets avoided the major trade lanes. Even their military vessels had become more compliant. "The savage species is learning its place," observed Councillor Thex, his insectoid body clicking with pleasure. "Perhaps we will not need to implement the final solution after all." Zelenara's harmonic voice carried a note of caution. "Do not underestimate them, Thex. Humans are adaptable. This compliance may be tactical rather than genuine." "What can they do?" laughed Councillor Vexahar, his gelatinous form rippling with amusement. "They have no advanced technology, no powerful allies. Their ships are crude, their weapons primitive. They are barely more civilized than the animals they evolved from." The High Arbiter was about to respond when every alarm in the station began screaming at once. Emergency lighting bathed the council chamber in blood-red shadows as officers rushed to their stations. "Report," Selenara commanded. "Long-range sensors are detecting massive gravitational anomalies throughout the system," replied her tactical officer, a multi-limbed Keth Mori whose sensory organs were designed to process vast amounts of data simultaneously. "Whatever's causing them is moving at... That can't be right." "What?" "0.27 light speed and accelerating. Multiple contacts. They're not following any known propulsion physics." Selenara's form flickered with alarm. "Show me." The tactical display expanded to show the entire Vega system. 7 massive signatures were approaching from different vectors, each one moving at a significant fraction of light speed. As they watched, the signatures began to slow, revealing themselves as the alien sensors finally managed to resolve their shapes. Ships. Massive, brutal-looking vessels that seemed to be built from humanity's collective nightmares. The lead ship alone was larger than Harmony Station. its hull studded with weapons emplacements and scarred with armor plating that suggested it had been built for one purpose: war. Impossible, whispered Councillor Thex. Humans don't have this technology. Incoming transmission, reported the communications officer. On screen. Admiral Santos appeared in the hologram, her uniform crisp, her expression calm. Behind her, the bridge of the Nemesis hummed with lethal efficiency. High Arbiter Zelonara, Santos said formally. I am Admiral Catherine Santos of the Terran Defense Force. I believe we need to have a conversation about the massacre of the merchant vessel Serenity's Dream. Zelnara's crystalline structure pulsed with indignation. You dare bring warships into hegemony space? This is an act of war. No, Santos replied softly. This is an act of justice. You see, you've spent the last 50 years calling us savage, primitive, dangerous. You've used those words to justify your oppression, your casual cruelty, your murder of our innocents. But I think you've misunderstood something fundamental about humanity. She leaned forward slightly. We're not savage despite our civilization. We're civilized despite our savagery. Every human child learns to control their violent impulses, to channel their aggression into productive endeavors, to build rather than destroy. But that violence is still there, High Arbiter. It's the foundation everything else is built on. The tactical display showed the human fleet taking positions around the station. Weapon systems powered up with an ominous whine that vibrated through Harmony's superstructure. We tried to be the species you wanted us to be, Santos continued. Peaceful, compliant, civilized. But you kept pushing, kept testing, kept killing our people and expecting us to simply accept it as the natural order. Zelnara's voice rose to a harmonic shriek. You wouldn't dare attack a diplomatic station. The entire galaxy would unite against you. Santos smiled, and it was the most terrifying expression Zelnara had ever seen on any sentient being. The entire galaxy already considers us savage monsters, High Arbiter. What exactly do we have to lose? This is madness. You'll destroy yourselves. Maybe, Santos admitted, but we'll take you with us. And maybe that's enough. TDF Nemesis, Battle Bridge. Commander Park watched the tactical display with professional interest as the human fleet completed its deployment. 7 ships against a station defended by 43 vessels of various classes. On paper, the odds were impossibly bad. In reality, the hegemony had never faced humanity's true military potential. Admiral, he reported, all ships report ready for combat operations. The hegemony fleet is maintaining defensive positions around the station. Santos nodded. Signal the fleet. Execute Pattern Omega. The 7 human vessels moved with deadly precision, their formation flowing like a school of predators. The lead ship, TDF Ragnarok, launched the first salvo, a spread of quantum-tunneling torpedoes that simply ignored the station's shields and detonated inside the outer ring. The explosion was beautiful and terrible, a flower of nuclear fire that vaporized an entire section of the station. But it was just the beginning. Nemesis brought her singularity cannon to bear on the largest hegemony warship, a kilometer-long dreadnought that represented the pinnacle of Zephyrian military engineering. The weapon fired once, creating a microscopic black hole that existed for exactly 0.3 seconds before evaporating via Hawking radiation. The dreadnought simply ceased to exist, its mass converted to energy in a flash that briefly outshone Vega itself. Target destroyed, Park reported calmly. Engaging secondary targets. The hegemony fleet tried to respond, but their elegant, energy-efficient weapons were no match for humanity's crude, overwhelming firepower. Plasma beams that could slice through asteroid belts met reactive armor that channeled the energy into capacitor banks. Quantum disruptors that could unmake matter at the molecular level encountered hulls lined with exotic matter that simply absorbed the effect. "They're trying to surrender," reported the communications officer. Santos didn't hesitate. "Ignore them. Continue the attack." Hegemony Council Station Harmony. Command Center. High Arbiter Zelanara watched her perfect world crumble around her. The council chamber was in chaos, emergency lighting casting everything in hellish shadows while the station shuddered under the human assault. Half the defensive fleet was gone, simply erased by weapons that should have been impossible. "Tactical assessment," she commanded. Her military advisor, a Kethmori general whose species had never lost a battle in 3,000 years of warfare, could barely speak. They're not using any known physics. Their weapons ignore our defenses. Their armor absorbs our attacks. It's as if they've weaponized the fundamental forces of the universe itself. How is that possible? "It's not," the general replied. Unless they've been preparing for this war for far longer than we realized. These aren't ships, High Arbiter. They're doomsday weapons." Another section of the station exploded, venting atmosphere and debris into the void. Emergency bulkheads slammed shut, but everyone knew it was only a matter of time. "Open a channel to the human admiral," Zelanara ordered. "Full surrender, whatever terms they want." "They're not responding to surrender signals," the communications officer reported. "I don't think they're interested in negotiation." Zelanara's crystalline form flickered with desperate understanding. The humans weren't here to conquer or to make demands. They were here to make a point, the most violent, terrifying point in galactic history. TDF Nemesis, Battle Bridge, station structural integrity at 15%, Commander Park reported. "Defensive fleet is completely neutralized. We could finish this in the next 5 minutes. Admiral Santos stared at the tactical display, watching the death of everything the hegemony represented. Part of her felt sick at the carnage, but a larger part, the part that remembered 342 innocent dead, felt only cold satisfaction. "Admiral," called the communications officer, "we're receiving a broadcast from the station. It's not a surrender, ma'am." "Put it through." High Arbiter Zelanara's image appeared, her crystalline form cracked and dim. Behind her, the council chamber was a ruin of twisted metal and sparking electronics. "Admiral Santos," she said, her harmonic voice barely audible above the alarms. "You have proven your point. Humanity is indeed savage. You have exceeded our worst fears." Santos said nothing. "But do you understand what you have done? This station broadcasts to every world in the hegemony. Billions of beings are watching their leaders die at the hands of primitive barbarians. You have united the galaxy against your species. There will be no peace, no negotiation, no mercy. We will hunt you to extinction." Santos finally spoke, her voice calm and measured. "High Arbiter, you seem to be under the impression that we came here to start a war. But you're wrong. We came here to end one. The war you started 50 years ago when you decided that humanity was too dangerous to exist as equals." She leaned forward. "You want to hunt us to extinction? Good. Come. We'll be waiting." The transmission cut to static as another explosion rocked the station. "Fleet signal," Park reported. "Execute final phase." The 7 human ships moved into formation around the dying station. As one, they activated their most terrifying weapon. Not the singularity cannons or quantum torpedoes, but something far more insidious. Nanoscale assemblers, released in clouds that spread through the station's atmosphere like a plague. They didn't destroy, they converted. Metal became something stronger. Electronics became something smarter. The station itself began to change, its elegant curves becoming harsh angles, its beautiful architecture becoming functional brutality. Within hours, Harmony Station would be humanity's forward base in hegemony space, a monument to the galaxy's greatest mistake. Sol System, Earth. President Elena Vasquez stood in the war room beneath the Swiss Alps, watching the tactical display with grim satisfaction. The reports from Vega were better than they'd dared hope. Complete victory, minimal casualties, and a message that would echo across the galaxy. "The Hegemony Council is demanding our immediate surrender," reported Secretary of Defense Morrison. "They're threatening to mobilize every military force in known space." "Let them come," Vasquez replied. "We've been preparing for this war for 3 decades. Every human world, every colony, every space station is armed and ready. The Hegemony wanted to see savages. We'll show them what 10,000 years of human warfare looks like." She turned to address the room full of military leaders and government officials. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are no longer asking for our place in the galaxy. We are taking it. The Hegemony has made the mistake of believing that civilization makes us weak. They've forgotten that we are the species that turned every tool into a weapon, every discovery into an advantage, every setback into a reason to fight harder." The display showed new fleet movements throughout human space. Ships emerging from hidden bases, weapon platforms coming online, entire asteroid belts revealing themselves to be mobile fortresses. "They called us savage," President Vasquez continued. "They were right. We are savage. We are the children of a world that tried to kill us every day for 4 billion years. We are the descendants of apes who learned to make fire and then used it to conquer a planet. We are the only species in the galaxy that considers war to be an art form." She paused, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than any shout. "And now they're going to learn why that's exactly what makes us dangerous." Hegemony Space, 3 months later. The war that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The Hegemony, for all their advanced technology and superior numbers, had never faced an enemy that turned every engagement into a learning experience. Human ships adapted mid-battle, incorporating captured technology and developing countermeasures in real time. More importantly, they had never faced an enemy that didn't share their concepts of civilized warfare. The Hegemony fought to achieve objectives, control territory, secure resources, force surrender. Humans fought to win, and winning meant the complete elimination of their enemy's ability to threaten them. When the Zephyrians blockaded the Tau Ceti system, the humans didn't try to break the blockade. They sterilized the Zephyrian homeworld with relativistic projectiles launched from the outer system. When the Kethmori tried to cut human supply lines, they found their industrial worlds infested with self-replicating machines that turned their own infrastructure against them. The war crimes tribunals would have lasted centuries if there had been anyone left to conduct them. By the end of the first year, the Hegemony's military forces were in full retreat. By the end of the second, their civilian populations were evacuating entire star systems. By the end of the third, the few survivors were sending desperate peace overtures that went unanswered. Humanity had finally found its place in the galaxy, at the top of the food chain. New Harmony Station, Vega System, present day. Admiral Santos stood in the observation deck of what had once been the Hegemony's greatest symbol of unity, and was now humanity's forward command post. The station bore no resemblance to its former self. The elegant curves had been replaced by brutal functionality, the artistic flourishes by weapon emplacements. "Final casualty reports, Admiral," Commander Park said, approaching with a datapad. "Hegemony military forces, complete elimination. Civilian populations, 94% reduction. Remaining survivors have been relocated to designated worlds under human supervision." Santos nodded. The numbers were staggering, but she felt no guilt. The Hegemony had made their choice when they decided that genocide was an acceptable solution to the human problem. What about the other species, the ones that didn't participate in the war? Mixed reactions. Some are requesting immediate alliance treaties. Others are maintaining strict neutrality. A few are trying to build their own defensive fleets, but nothing that poses a significant threat. Santos smiled grimly. They're learning. Good. Fear is a much better foundation for peace than mutual respect. She turned to look out at the stars, visible through the reinforced viewing port. Somewhere out there, in the vast darkness between the galaxies, other civilizations were probably watching, learning, deciding whether humanity was a threat to be eliminated or an ally to be courted. Do you think we did the right thing, Admiral? Park asked quietly. Santos considered the question. 3 years ago, she might have agonized over it. Now, with the blood of 2 species on her hands and the survival of her own assured, the answer seemed obvious. They called us savage, Commander. They were right, but they made one critical error in their assessment. What's that? Santos turned away from the viewport, her expression calm and certain. They assumed that being savage was a weakness. They forgot that sometimes in a galaxy full of predators, the biggest monster is the one that gets to define civilization. She walked toward the exit, her footsteps echoing in the harsh corridors of humanity's new empire. Make sure the other species remember that lesson, Commander. I'd hate to have to teach it again. Behind her, the stars continued their eternal dance, indifferent to the rise and fall of civilizations. But in the spaces between them, in the silence of the void, something had changed. The galaxy had learned to fear again. And humanity had learned to embrace what they had always been, not despite their civilization, but because of it. The monsters that all the other monsters checked their closets for. Savage, primitive, dangerous. Exactly as advertised. From A History of the Hegemony Wars by Dr. Eden Rose Eden, published by New Terra University Press, 2395 CE. The question historians most often ask about the Hegemony Wars is not whether humanity was justified in its response to 50 years of systematic oppression, but whether the galaxy would have been better served by a different outcome. The answer, uncomfortable as it may be, is probably not. The hegemony's definition of civilization required the subjugation of any species that didn't conform to their ideals of peaceful coexistence. What they failed to understand is that peace is not the absence of violence, it is the presence of justice. And sometimes, achieving justice requires a willingness to become the very thing your enemies fear most. Humanity's victory in the Hegemony Wars established a new galactic order based not on moral superiority, but on the recognition that survival often requires the embrace of one's own nature. We are indeed savage, primitive, and dangerous. But we are also, for the first time in our species' history, free. The price of that freedom was the near extinction of 2 ancient civilizations and the transformation of humanity from a species seeking acceptance into one demanding respect. History will judge whether that price was worth paying. But history, as always, is written by the victors. And we, for better or worse, are the victors. The galaxy called us savage. We proved they were right, and in doing so, we finally found our place among the stars, not as supplicants begging for acceptance, but as predators claiming our territory. The lesson, for any species that might challenge us in the future, is simple. Be very careful what you call your monsters. They might just decide to live up to the name.